We arrived back at the Waldorf Astoria. Mr. Bolton was waiting for a Tesla in the lobby. Colonel Astor married Miss Force this morning in Newport, he reported. They left immediately on his yacht for a honeymoon. When will he return? Tesla asked, clearly troubled by the news. He is planning an extended tour of Europe with his new young wife. The bad press and scandal have been very draining for both of them. They needed to get away for a while. I would venture to say he will probably be back better part of a year. A year, Tesla cried, throwing his arms out in frustration. You might send a telegram, Mr. Bolt suggested, though it will be difficult to reach him since he will be moving from hotel to hotel. This is terrible, Tesla said. I must go upstairs to my apartment to lie down. Are you all right? Can I help? I ask. Excuse me, Jane, he says to me. I am overcome. I thanked him for talking to me. It was a pleasure, he replied politely, despite the fact that his complexion had grown nearly white and a purple vein in his forehead throbbed visibly. You are a courageous young woman with intellectual curiosity. You never lose either trait. Thank you, sir. I hope you feel better. With a courtly bow, he strode off towards the elevators. I was sad to see him go. I gazed around, looking for Mimi or Thad, but did not see either of them. I sat a few minutes looking over the notes I had taken, and then went up the elevator to John Jacobs' Astor's suite to find Mimi. Natalie answered my knock and bade me to enter. Come look at your sister, she said to me. She is très chic. Mimi stood in the middle of the living room. Naturally, I recognized my own sister, but barely. Her hair was piled high atop her head. Jeweled barrettes sparkled in the black sea of carefully sculpted curls. She had a new satin dress, so deeply blue that it seemed to shimmer. Her bodice puffed sleeves from her shoulder to elbow, and they narrowed dramatically as it continued down to her wrist. The long skirt formed out with a black under crinoline revealed her black stocking ankles. On her feet was a brand new pair of shining leather high-button boots. Dressed like a young society woman, she was completely ravishing. Natalie bought this for me, she said. What do you think? You're gorgeous, I cried. Isn't she? Natalie said. The moment I saw Mimi, I knew she was a diamond in the rough. Now she is polished and will be a perfect companion. I think she's already a perfect companion, I say. Perhaps for you, Natalie allowed. But now she is just the right companion for me. I look at Mimi confused. Mimi's voice was bright with strain. I'm going to Europe, Jane. Natalie has hired me as her assistant and companion. Isn't it wonderful? Wonderful, I cried. Have you gone crazy? Late that evening, I stood on the train station platform, still sniffling into a handkerchief. How could Mimi do such a thing? I had pleaded with her not to go off with Natalie over to Europe, but she insisted. She said fate had brought her the chance, and she was going to take it. She found her an escape hatch, a way to discover who she might be in another sort of world. My mind reeled with the possibilities. Would she ever come home? Might she jump ship, deserting even Natalie in some sort of exotic port on the other side of the planet? How could I live without my big sister, who had always been my best friend? It was going to be hard enough to face Mother as it was. Now I would have to tell her something immeasurably worse, that I'd lost my sister. I heard another announcement from the train bound for Washington, D.C. I considered taking it and just running away altogether. But I knew I couldn't do it. Not to return to Spearville would have been to further compound the hurt my mother and sisters would endure at the loss of Mimi. Jane. I look towards the shout and I see Thad hurrying towards me, his blue summer jacket flying behind him. His hair was amused and his brows were sweaty from running. His worried expression transformed into a smile of relief as he neared me. Were you going to leave without saying goodbye? He asked. I smiled through my tears, glad to see him. Even in my misery, this was an unexpected pleasure. I didn't know where you were, I explained. How did you find me? I saw Mimi at the hotel and she told me that you had left. My tears started to fall heavily once again at the mention of her name. Did she tell you why she's not with me? I asked. She did, and I also see that she upset you badly. She says she wants to see the world. I spoke through my salty tears. She's not sure what her future holds. Claims that this is her fate. He fished a worn but clean handkerchief from his jacket pocket and handed it to me so I could mop my tears, soaking my face. Oh, don't worry, he said soothingly. She's just dazzled by all the stuff. You know, the dresses, the suits, the decorations. A free trip to Europe is pretty hard to resist, don't you think? But to travel with those two, they're not even married, I objected. Judge not that ye may not be judged. That quoted a scripture lightly. I hung my head in despair. It's just wrong. Dad had took hold of my hand comfortingly. We can't control what other people do, he commented. I bet she'll be back home in no time, you'll see. I hung my head. I nodded and sniffled. Do you really think so? I'm sure, he said. His unconcern and confident were contagious, and his spirits lifted a bit. He left hold of my hand and gently whisked the lingering tears from my cheek. I'm not concerned about Mimi. She'll have a great time, he went on. It's you I'm worried about. I looked up into his steady blue gaze. Me? Despite my upset state, my heart did a little quick, delighted bounce. He's worried about me? Then the full realization of his unexpected appearance hit me. He'd run more than 12 blocks uptown to the station because of me. Me. Thad had heard from Tesla about the man with the bowler hat. Are you alright? Were you scared? He asked. Terrified, I confirmed. But Tesla is going ahead with his project anyways. Do you think it's wise? Will he be safe? I'll stick close to him like a bodyguard, Thad said confidently. I wasn't sure he'd be any match for the bowler top thug. Maybe you should start carrying a walking stick, I suggested. I was a wrestling champ back in school, he boasted, with a playful wink. Were you really? I asked, impressed. Sure, I'm a preacher's son, remember? I won't lie. Be careful anyway, I consoled. He looked deeply into my eyes without meaning to. I leaned in closer, irresistibly drawn to his energy and warmth. I think he must have moved towards me as well, because somehow we came to be standing very close to each other. He's still holding my hand, and I looked up at him. I don't know exactly where you live, Jane, Thad said, with the steam from the newly arrived train billowing around us. I want to write to you. I want to write to you. 6 simple words. But there was an unspoken multitude of words that could spring from that. On the day when I felt I'd lost so much, suddenly I had a brief glimpse of something being gained. Spearfield is so small that any letter addressed to me would arrive at my house if I told him. Would you really write to me? I asked hopefully. I'd like to, he replied. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I would be good to keep up, even if it's only through letters. That would be great, I said. You'd write back, wouldn't you? He checked. Of course I would. With Mimi gone, I really need someone to talk with, and I also find it easy and interesting to talk to you. He stood there for a moment, smiling at each other like 2 fools. For all our talk of talking, we are romantically speechless. The train broke the spell that sounding the warning blast. All aboard for Albany, connecting ports to the northwest corridor. The conductor yelled. You better go, Thad said. I suppose so. It was so hard to leave. We began walking together towards the train. How did your interview with Tesla go? He asked. Wonderful. It should be a great article, I told him, climbing up the metal stairs to the small platform between the train cars. And the most amazing thing happened. He remembered me from all the way back in 1898. Can you believe it? I was only 4 at the time. The train engines chugged and the white mists of smoke rose around me. Better take your seat, miss, the conductor advised. Thad jumped nimbly onto the train, grabbing hold of the railing between the cars just as the train moved forward. I gasped, but with a touch of delight and staring, you better get down, I cautioned. A few minutes before it leaves the station, he said, the train slowly chugged blowing its whistle as the inched up the tracks. Wait, did you say you were only 4 in 1989? He asked. I nodded. Why? I just assumed you were older. The train continued moving forward, slowly picking up speed, and Thad leapt easily to the ground. I was prepared for how he wrenched his jump away from me would be. I felt so safe with him. Now it was as though he jumped out of my life altogether. I was abruptly on my own again. He waved, an uneasy expression played on his face, and mine probably mirrored it. Don't forget to write, I called him, waving as the train carried me off. He waved back, but did not say anything. The conductor came to the doorway. You must take your seat, miss. It's not safe to stand here. With the last wave to Thad, I stepped inside. I slumped into my seat, disappointed. Tears once again wet my eyes. Grim reality of my dismissal situation, which had momentarily been cushioned by my delight at Thad's arrival, surged back to me with full force. I was on my way to a currently angry mother and sisters who would probably be bewildered and feel caught in the middle. Would they all blame me for letting Mimi run off as she had? How was I going to face it all without her? And now I was worried that the one bright spot that I had looked forward to, the letter from Thad, would not arrive. The last 3 minutes of our time together had, I feared, completely changed his view of me. In a second he had gone from seeing me as his contemporary to viewing me as a child. Why couldn't I ever keep my mouth shut? The train was now running at full speed, racing onto the blackness of the tunnel that would carry me away from the existing city, away from Thad. Shutting my eyes, I lost myself in the motion of the train carrying me forward. What would it be like to travel on and never arrive, simply to keep moving with no end point? I remembered what Tesla had said about traveling into the future, but for a moment I was in no rush to get there. The future would be fully upon me in the moment I arrived back in Spirit Vale.